welcome to I'm Not Crazy, but with Dr. Rhonda Mattox. Today we are talking about something that is near and dear to my heart, and by the what I hear from others is near and dear to your hearts as well. It is called boundaries. Today's show, Out of Bounds, pressing reset on family members when they step out of bounds, is going to be the bomb diggity, as a girl in the 80s or 90s might say. I need you to understand that I have an amazing all-star cast of characters. And listen, you are going to want to share this. As I introduce each of them, do what you know to do, and that is rep your city. Tell us who you are and where you're tuning in from, and then go ahead and text your friends and say, hey, you know how you've been having trouble telling your mama that she needs to back up out of your dating life? This is the show you want to listen to. Listen, we have today with us an all-star cast in the Dr. Tiffany Haynes. She is doing her thing as a psychologist, works a lot with faith-based communities. We also have in our midst the lovely Charmaine Beasley, who is an LPC therapist. She talks boundaries. And listen, her sidekick and other co-host, Jasmine Bishop, is on with her LPC. They have a show, and I don't want to mess up the name, and so you all please, but it's about Black girls being dope, Black women being dope, and so they will include in the links how you can tune into their amazing podcast. Now, you know we have the amazing, the lovely attorney Joyce, who does her own show, and I can't see what it says, but I know she is a mental health advocate, and she is here to represent people who have absolutely no mental health training as it relates to licensure, but who has a PhD in the School of Hard Knocks and is here to rep those people who have, who know they need it. Do me this solid, do not give Ellis Dean, don't give him a thumbs up when I introduce him, even though we know he's a favorite or whatever, because he's been giving me a hard time today. And I want you all to know, because of the time that we've had in prepping for this show and what has come against us, we know this is fit to be the bomb diggity for real, family. Now, thank you, ladies, for coming. I'm so glad you're here. I'm sending you a virtual hug. And to those who are in the audience listening, I'm sending you a virtual hug as well, because I know if you're tuning in, that somebody somewhere has been stepping out of line, been stepping on your toes, been crossing the lines, you've drawn the line.
Speak on it. Speak on it.
Look, you've drawn the line in the sand. They've overstepped it and did a cartwheel on it. It was like, I don't care what you say, I'm gonna do what I want. And so you were like, hey, I'm fed up. I'm trying not to catch a case. If that is you, this is your show. This is the show that you want to be on. Now, I think I introduced everybody, and let me just take a woo-saw moment. Welcome. Now, we're talking boundaries. Before we jump in and do our dialogue and our dog and pony show, we want to make sure all of us are on the same stage. So listen, I'm going to ask the Dr. Tiffany Haynes. Tell us what boundaries are and why are they important?
You know, I feel like when you asked that question, when you were talking about boundaries, I had to think, like, what do I think boundaries are? And I was thinking about that, and I said, you know what? I used to think that boundaries were about controlling what other people do. That's not really what boundaries are, because I have no control over what somebody does. But they're really the limits that I place on the exposure I have to behaviors and to actions and to words that are not going to be serving for me, serving my well-being. So it's my opportunity to limit my exposure to things that are not well for me, not necessarily my opportunity to control what other people are doing.
I like. And as you were talking, the thing that struck me is it's almost like you're setting the expectations. I can't tell you how to behave, but I'm setting the expectations that I have for the treatment that I will receive. And I'm also identifying the line in the sand for, am I going to continue to tolerate this? Or am I going to exit this scenario because this is not serving me? Is that an accurate assessment of what I think I heard you say?
Absolutely. It's your opportunity to say what serves you well. It's your opportunity to say, what do I need to be my best self? And to then say, what is going on right here is not leading me to my best self, so I'm going to limit my exposure for it.
Absolutely. Does anyone else want to add to our definitions here before we head on? And we have Ellis here for the male perspective. So Ellis, you feel free to jump in anytime you want to, okay?
Oh, thank you.
I
But
do.
I think boundaries are a symbol of how you see yourself, right? And so if you see yourself, if you don't have that confidence or esteem, your boundaries are going to be a little bit weak, and people are going to allow people to step on you. If you have that confidence, if you have that belief in yourself, and see yourself as deserving of respect, then you're going to have a firm, hard boundary that's going to give you that space to be who you are. So it's really when we're talking about boundaries today, really, I think the audience should think about how they see themselves and how they reflect themselves in the boundaries that they set.
That's good. Joyce, I saw you on mute for a second. What did you want to add?
Yeah, because I love what everyone has said so far, and I love what Dr. Haynes said about your best self, because often when we hear about boundaries, it feels kind of selfish. I'm the center of the universe, and if you aren't serving me, then I'm going to cut you out. But really, my belief is not, it's not what we're saying at all. And my belief is that we are put on this earth to be in community with one another and to serve each other. And guess what? Boundaries help you serve people better. Because when you're respected, when you're appreciated, when you're able to show up as yourself, you're able to fulfill your assignment and your calling. So for those of you who are afraid to set boundaries because it feels selfish and it feels self-centered, you can't even serve as your best self if you aren't being respected, appreciated, honored in the way that you need to in order to thrive, in order to give. So it's not negatively selfish. It actually empowers you to be your best self so that you can give in the way that you are called to give.
That's good. Charmaine or Jasmine, either of you want to add anything before we move on?
Well, just to kind of say what everybody else has said, I don't know that there's anything new, but I'll just say it in a different way. I think that boundaries just help us love people well, right? They're structures that help us love people well. And like Mr. Ellis said, that is a reflection of you, right? If you love yourself well, that will reflect in your boundaries. If you struggle with that, that will reflect in your boundaries.
Mm-hmm. And I think sometimes we struggle with boundaries because we enter into relationships and we're ever evolving. The person that is before you today is not the person that Dr. Haynes met however many years ago when we met. And so as I have evolved, as you have evolved, our confidence has changed, our levels of confidence have changed, the relationships have changed, our awareness, our knowledge has changed. Why is it so important to set those boundaries? And we hinted at it, but why is it important to set the boundaries or reset the boundaries? And I'm getting to family, but I want to make sure we lay the groundwork. But why is it important to establish boundaries to begin with?
I think that the hard part, or like, it's important to set them because like everyone has already said, the boundaries set the tone for how the relationship is going to go, like, how I want to be treated, like, how I navigate and live life. But like you said, that the boundaries will also change as well too, which sometimes is the hard part, and like, what makes it hard for us to set them, because once they shift or once they're set, they are affecting other people. Our boundaries do
Right.
affect the people we are in a relationship with, and then they have to adjust as well. And sometimes that can be difficult to people to adjust to new boundaries. It could be
Mhm.
something as small as saying that we have brunch every Sunday, and then suddenly I say, I don't want to leave the house on Sundays anymore. That affects you because, like, that was our time. And people have the ability to say, okay, that affects me. I'm like, I'm not mad about it, but okay, now I have to adjust that this is, like, your new boundary. And there's a
Mhm.
fear in that sometimes of us implementing a boundary that someone can't handle. If we have issues with abandonment, or we have issues with with rejection, I'd rather not implement the boundary because I don't want to rock the boat. And then, like, you get mad at me and then I lose the relationship and so forth and so on. And but, like, also, like, recognizing what that looks like when we do have to change and implement boundaries as well too.
That's good. That's good. So I can set the boundary and I can change my mind and reset the boundary. recognizing that it may impact whether the other person wants to continue to engage in the relationship. And that's scary. And that may be in part why sometimes we don't set those boundaries. Anybody want to add anything to what Charmaine said? All right. So she introduced the the fear part, perhaps, of why. What are some other reasons that we don't set boundaries?
Expectations. I think boundaries are expectations, and when we are younger, I'll just say we're younger and we're kind of less confident. We tend to accept more, and then but that's setting the expectation for that person. Oh, they're going to accept this. They're going to accept that. They're going to accept this. And then as we get older, as Charmaine was talking about, we start pushing that boundary further and further out because we gain that confidence and that self love that says, you know what, I'm not going to take that anymore. But that does have an impact on that person that has been used to taking from you, used to overstepping that boundary, used to coming to you and getting you to do whatever they want you to do. And all of a sudden you say no, and you find that one word sentence of no. And then, all of a sudden they start feeling, and now you've got feelings and all this other stuff that come into play. And you're really just saying, okay, I love myself enough to push you back. And you got to be okay with that. If you care about me, as you say you do, then you accept the new boundary instead of just reacting and saying, oh, you're not the same. You don't change and all the stuff that people say when you just set a firm boundary that says, I love me enough to set this boundary.
Oh, that's good. And what you said, Ellis, is you have changed, because how many times when we were in college, particularly as young adults, we would run back up on the people from the neighborhood. We had changed, we had evolved, but somehow it's almost like we felt guilty. Like, I did change. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I changed. You know, so everything evolves and changes if you keep on living. The only thing that does not change is if you're dead, maybe, and then you're dissolving. Joyce, I saw you on mute.
Yeah, I love what Edna and Corin are saying in the comments. I know today we're focusing on family, and we're going to have a talk about friends on one of my shows, so stay tuned for that, Friends and Boundaries. I'm sure Dr. Rhonda is going to cover it as well. But along with fear and along with expectations, I think we also have a hard time setting boundaries because we don't know what we need. We just don't know. I was in a conversation recently where my heart was thudding, and it was such an elevated and heated conversation. And it just hit me in that moment that I don't like being spoken to this way. But I had been spoken to this way by this person for over a decade, and it was just normal. So in that moment, I said, I cannot navigate this when you are like this. So I'm going to have to end the conversation. I did not know that's what I needed until I was in the heat of the moment and my heart was racing. So I did not set that boundary sooner because I didn't even know that I needed to be spoken to a certain way. I don't mind conflict, but what I can never tolerate is an elevated speech or pitch or voice. And sometimes we don't set boundaries because we don't know what we need. That's also okay because we're evolving, like we've all said, we're navigating it. But I think lack of knowledge also inhibits us from setting the boundaries that we need.
Absolutely. And when we're in family relationships and we've been in these relationships for decades, people will say stuff like, you still wear behind the ears, discounting who you are, or, you got book sense, but no common sense. And so the stage is set for them to discount and dismiss you because they've known you for so long. And many times when we're preparing for the family reunions, we put our coat of armor on because we know the aunties are going to talk about the weight gain. They're going to talk about your bad kids, whatever. And so you are so used to putting on that armor, but something happens sometimes, particularly when you introduce kids to the thing, to the element, whereas you may not have been willing to go to bat and protect yourself. Many times you're like, no, you're not going to talk to my kids like that, or you're not going to treat da-da-da like that. So what are the indicators that within family, even though people have been walking over these bounds, not acknowledging bounds, and not having any boundaries, what are some of the indicators that it is time to set boundaries? And what does that look like? Charmaine, you are smiling like you got something to say, honey. Say it, girl. Unmute and take the mic.
I think that it's kind of like what Joyce was saying too, that sometimes you don't know until like because like you don't always have a self-awareness until like you do have an awareness that this is like that this is wrong. And sometimes it also takes other people. I laughed because I know that I was in those situations where people in my family that I did not have boundaries with, and I allowed things to happen that were not okay. And then I got married, and my husband was like, "This is a problem." And I'm like, "No, you need to deal with this because like this is how you function." And he's like, "No, I'm not dealing with this because this is a problem." But even for me to be like, "Oh, like he's right. I probably should not be allowing these things to happen." I think that sometimes it is kind of like they said that sometimes we don't always realize that things are a problem, and then sometimes it's a fear with family because you be the one who speaks up or the one who says something and you're the problem.
I was going to say it's something very similar. Like you're challenging your family, the way you do things in your family now when you speak up against it. And that's a scary thing. I don't know about y'all. I don't think I was really allowed to have boundaries growing up. I don't think that wasn't something our family talked about. You know what I'm saying? It was like, you are a child. Here are the adults. The adults make decisions. You go along with these decisions, and you're respectful. And respectful means blind obedience. You don't question. You don't get to say anything. And so then, when you get to be an adult, you don't have those skills. You haven't learned the skills of how to negotiate boundaries because you never had a chance to do it. And now you're an adult. You don't know what you need. But if you think you need something different, you don't have that skill set. And now you're challenging all of these family ways of doing everything that's been going on for centuries. And that's a scary thing. So a lot of times we just sit and we find out different ways. We go to the family reunion late. We come early and see a couple of people and leave. We do all these things to go around actually having to have the conversation and saying, the way you're speaking to me is not okay. The way that you bring this up is not okay. Because we just don't know how to do it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I would say this, like everybody on this panel, I've been Black my whole life, and so there are roles that you have in your family, right? And those roles get established very, very early. Somebody's the jokester, somebody's the planner, somebody does this, somebody might be the black sheep, somebody, there's these roles, and when you start setting new boundaries in that's going to disrupt the dynamic. And so you have those dynamics that are now going to have to shift when you try to set new boundaries as we get older. As Tiffany was talking about, especially when you have that parent-child dynamic, right? Because I don't care. I could be 40, 50, 60 years old. It's still my mama, right? And so you still want to have respect for my mom, aunt, whomever, even though they are habitual boundary steppers. And so we have to be better about, and that is a tricky role to play, trying to set boundaries with people that have historically had a kind of that dynamic that says you do what I say and that's it.
Yes. Tiffany introduced this. Ellis hit it. Jasmine, you look like you are unmuted and ready to say something. Carry on.
I'm ready. I'm with everybody on this. I think we're all on the same page. But like Ellis said, I'm gonna keep it black. So how our people respond to this, right? Oh, you changed up. Oh, you don't fool with us no more. You like all of that stuff. Even mamas and grandmamas being like, you came out of me. I can do whatever I want. I can say whatever I want. I can do whatever I want to do, and you shouldn't have anything to say about it. I feel like it's very ingrained in our culture a little bit about like the hierarchy, the status, right? If I am here, then I get to do whatever and however. And I think I work a lot with clients who have family like this, of just like, this is my position, and therefore you need to take everything that I do. And it is work to help them unlearn that. It is work for them to be able to stand up to that system, because like you guys said, it is a system. There is pressure. Well, this is just how we do things. This is just how Big Mama operates. Don't nobody like say anything to her. We tiptoe. We do all of these things. And so sometimes putting in boundaries is also shifting the whole family system. And a lot of times families aren't excited about that. They're not real happy about that.
I've never met a family that was happy about that ever. And I think that the challenge for me especially was that in as I entered therapy myself, while and if you are a mental health professional, you are strongly encouraged, sometimes mandated, to have your own therapy so you can know what this process feels like. And so I remember in the process of my supervision sharing, and I remember the lady asking me, "Why are you smiling?" And I was talking about something that was ratchet, and I don't remember what it was, but it was awful. And she was horrified, and I had a smile on my face. And she was just like, "Why are you smiling?" Well, I had been in this culture of fix your face. Even if you didn't like it, you had your face right. You didn't look upset. You didn't slam a door. You didn't even speak on it, really. And so to be studying to be a psychiatrist and to have someone tell me your face does not match what you're saying, and then to hear her say, you it's okay for you to be angry. I mean, it's like I needed permission to be angry, and I didn't even understand it. And so sometimes we have muted our emotions because they were not safe to have in our family structure. You were either happy or you were happy, or you looked happy, but you didn't get to be sad. You didn't get to be angry. You didn't get to be shocked. You got to be happy or look happy.
Well, you
Am I
don't get
right?
to be, I know, 100%, but you don't get to be unhappy if I don't think there's a reason for you to be unhappy,
Right.
right? Don't cry or I'll give you something to cry about.
Right. Oh my gosh.
But I'm going to tell on myself for a minute and say that before we started this, I texted Charmaine and I said, "Hey, fix your face, fix your face. You're looking, you're looking real serious." So guilty.
Hey, you know what though? Can I ask a question to the panel? How many of y'all were able to lock your door in your house when you was growing up? Okay, right.
What? That wasn't my door. What do you mean?
Right.
Let's
Just
Even allow-
and if in the audience, if you're watching us, if you were able to lock your door, raise your hand. Or if you had to keep your door unlocked at all times growing up, go give a thumbs up in comments. Because I got kids and I'm like, they never lock their door. Because when that door is locked, oh, it's a problem.
Wow.
Oh yeah.
Dr. Hayes, you look like you about to say something.
No, I was gonna say, I mean, your door was closed when you were changing clothes. Other than that, your door was probably open in my house. And if it was closed, that was always an open invitation that they could just come in whenever. Because like, this is the house where I pay bills. If I pay bills here, I could go anywhere in this house. You don't pay bills. This is not your house. I allow you to live here. You don't have privacy in this house. So
I'm having PTSD right now. You keep talking, Tiffany.
I'm triggered right now. I feel it physically in my body.
and let me say, I'm an adult now, and still, my father will come into the house and just start going play. I'm like, "Hey, don't be going up there." He's like, But that's the dynamic. All his life, he's been in charge. So when he come even in the house where I do pay bills, I'm in charge.
Yes. And here's the thing, family. This is a problem because this sets our children up to be molested. If we are taught to do what adults say do, no question. If we're taught to give auntie a hug, no questions asked. If we're taught to sit in uncle's lap, no questions asked, then when the radars go off, when the red flags go off, and they were going off, and we were taught, it don't matter what your red flags are. I said give them a hug. Then that sets you up for abuse. That sets you up for misuse. And it's a complete setup. And so how do we know how we got here. We know how now that we are uncomfortable sometimes setting boundaries. How do you unlearn that? I think Jasmine or someone say it needs to be unlearned. And we all know we need to unlearn it. But how? Joyce, I saw you unmute. Were you unmuting for that, or did you want to?
So many trillion, billion things. So first of all, practice. I want to go back to a million things that you said. You talked about joy, happiness, and our happiness. A lot of us who are Black also come from the religious context, right? The joy of the Lord is our strength.
Mm-hmm.
Joyful in the Lord. God gave you all. And we ignore that Jesus wept. We ignore that given even the ability to cry, to cleanse and release us and rejuvenate us. So I really am super, super anti the religiosity around joy and the fact that we can't experience the full human spectrum of emotion that God has given us. So let's also break that as Black people. God gave us tear ducts. Jesus was angry when he was raising Lazarus from the death. You see so many examples of the full spectrum of humanity in Christ. So if you are religious and you're Black, you're allowed to feel all the things and process them and grieve and still be Christian first. Secondly, how do we even do this? We practice. I love what Charmaine said. I don't want to misrepresent titles. I love what you said about your husband being like, we're not going to allow this. Let me tell y'all something. When I first got married, my mom is queen of the pop-up. Like, I'm gonna just pop up. And her version of popping up is she'll always bring food to kind of soften the pop-up. So you've interrupted my flow. You didn't tell me you were coming, but I have a tray of fish. I'm Nigerian American, so it's always like some kind of like home cooked meal that I can't cook myself. So it makes you feel guilty sending her away. I know that she knows it. She knows it. Yes, she loves me.
Moms know.
She knows that if she comes with food, how can you say no to this face and this tray? But I had to tell her, and guess what? I was sweating. I'm even sweating now just thinking about it. But I was sweating when I met her outside and I said, thank you for this food. Mommy, you cannot pop up on me and my husband. What if we were being intimate? What if we were having an argument? What if we just were not home? We love you. We honor you. We thank you for the food, but you cannot just pop up on us because you are going to affect our relationship. And it was an uncomfortable conversation to literally have this with her on the street during a pop-up. But I really think it comes with practice. I don't think that there's ever going to be a time when you're breaking something that is cyclical, something that is generational, where you just feel comfortable doing it. You got to practice it. Practice it, even if it's in front of a mirror first, or if it's writing it down, if it's talking to a friend about it first. But it starts with practice. And it also helps if you kind of have a team or a teammate. There are times where I'll hand the phone to my husband and be like, can you talk to our mother? Right now it's both of our moms, and he'll be like, you know what? Joyce is feeling really elevated right now. It's reminding her of the death of her dad when you say those kinds of things. So mommy, can you please X, Y, and Z? So he'll express the things that I'm struggling expressing to my mother. So maybe a friend can also do that. A partner can do that. But really, really, I want us to give ourselves grace as we're breaking these things because they are not natural to do. And I really think practice is a good way.
I love it. Jasmine, I see you unmuted. Alice, I see you unmuted.
Well, I was just going to add something real quick. Is I think that perhaps we are not doing our best for our kids if the first time they're drawing those boundaries is when we're adults, right? Like the first boundary you have with your parent is when you're an adult and the dynamics have changed, right? They need to practice that while they're with us, while they're here in our homes, while they're young, and know that we respect their boundaries and we honor them. And, we value them as much as we value ourselves.
Mm-hmm. Excellent point. Excellent.
I give one knock before I open my kid's door. And then I open it. But at least give a warning shot.
No, we're telling you today on behalf of your children, cut it out.
but I will say to Joyce's point, I had a pivotal moment of boundary setting when I got married. And my mother is a habitual overstepper. And I hope she's not watching, but she knows this. I've told her this. She's a habitual overstepper. And so when I was single, it wasn't a problem. I'm just, okay, Mom, I'm going to do me anyway. I'm just not going to do it when you're watching. But I would do me anyway. But, it was what it was. I was the only boy, so I kind of had that freedom. But I got married, and she started overstepping with my wife. Because she overstepped with Ellis. Hey, you just an extension of Ellis. And so I had to have a moment where if I'm going to continue allowed to do this, this is going to be a problem in my marriage. And so I had to send that message not only to my mother, but to my wife. that, hey, I joined you, in front of God and everybody. So we're a team, and that settled a lot of things. And it was tough for my mom to accept that. I was like, look, you can't just be doing this, all the time the way you were, and things are going to have to change. And she tried, and then there were some times I had to, as a kid, say I had to ghost my mom for a minute to kind of let that sink in, that you're not just going to overstep, and then we're just going to allow you to come back in here. You're going to come back in the way that we're going to allow you into this space. And so it is a challenge, but that practice, I would say, I would add to Joyce. I agree with practicing, but practice in the moments where it's not really tense, right? Because when you get to that point where you're about to explode, it's not going to be a practice. It's going to be a throwdown, and that's not the way to handle those boundary settings. So do it in a way where everybody's calm and you can bring it up. I George, you handled it in the pop-up, but like I would say, do it between the pop-ups, right? When you're talking about, Bob, you have a tendency to just pop up over here. Let's talk about that, right? So I would encourage the people that are watching, and there's some great comments that are coming in and great questions, but I would just say, when you're doing that practice, try to do it in a space where that's calm and it's easier to have a rational conversation than is when you hit that last straw, that last nerve that everybody's got. Because then it's not going to end well normally when you're going off.
And I'll make this statement, and then Ellis, if you would start putting some of the comments up so we can address a couple of them. But one of the things that I do in my coaching role is I will tell people, we'll put them on the hot seat and say, tell me about something that you wish that you don't like the way you handled it. And then we will come up with scripts for when that scenario comes up again, because I assure you it will come up again. But if you have, 2 or 3 scripts for how to navigate this, and that we role play and we act this out, this really helps. And let me just, Mississippi, no, the boundaries are much different in the Black family, mine in particular, in years past and down through generations. Silence. Today, boundaries have become very necessary in order to maintain sanity. And the thing about it is, when you don't set those boundaries, it sets it up for resentment. And then what happens is, they think the relationship is solid. You have been feeling like this for 17 years, didn't say a word. Then they say, pass the potatoes, and you tell them off. And the people who are looking are like, shit, crazy. And they don't realize that you were, this is not about those potatoes. This is about the time that you were cooking the potatoes, and then you commented on Facebook about my potatoes, told everybody my potatoes were dry, then brought my husband some potatoes, and I didn't like the outfit you had when you brought the potatoes, and but they didn't hear all that. They just see, Auntie crazy. So
flip potato salad on the wall, and everybody's like,
ain't nobody in this house eat potatoes. But then you mentioned that resentment. And so the thing that we're afraid of losing that relationship, we end up losing it anyway, even when we don't set the boundary, because we have now become so resentful that we're not having a good relationship with Auntie. We ain't got that. We are, like you said, we are mad. We are going to family dinner, looking for the end of family dinner because we don't want to sit across from this person who did all of this. So that thing that we're so afraid of losing, we're already losing it. And I think that when you look at it that way, that at least if I set a boundary, I'm able to perhaps save something. It's not going to become easy. I think boundary setting is one of the hardest things that we have to do as adults, especially with family. So if you're, even in your practice, just know it is still hard. When you do it, you are going to, I think Joyce said she was sweating. I sweat when I do boundaries, heart pounding. My hands are, I'm holding my hands because it is scary. But it's also scary to sit in resentment for 17 years. It's scary to sit in places and not have the love and the relationship that you want.
Absolutely.
Be careful when you crack the dam, though. Be careful when you crack the dam, because I had to learn this. Once I cracked that dam on setting boundaries, I was looking for every little thing, and you become hypersensitive. And so you start, well, remember you did that? Like, you got to calm down, right? So when you crack that dam and you start having those conversations, yeah, I had the heart pounding, and I would feel, I would have a visceral, physical change when I would go visit my mother. And I was like, why am I feeling this way? And it was because of that resentment that Dr. Haynes is talking about. And over time, and then when I cracked that dam of being able to speak my mind and speak my truth, then I was just looking for every opportunity. And then it becomes a pylon. So you got to be careful, pick your spots, and have some calm, rational conversations. Otherwise, you could go to the opposite direction and just really just, and I got some get back to get for 20 plus years, and I'm gonna get back now. Calm down, people. It's not that serious.
So what I've heard Ellis say is, when the dam cracks, don't let it all come out.
Yes.
Practice measured discussion. Choose your battles wisely.
Yes.
And I'm going to throw in, though he didn't say this, and be working perhaps with a therapist while you're doing this, so that you don't go and ruin all the relationships. Charmaine, I see you're unmuted.
But so I was gonna go off of what was being said earlier too about the practice and how that looks. And one of the things that I encourage people to do is to sit with that fear sometimes, like if you, because sometimes they are smaller, but ask yourself, what's the worst thing that's gonna happen? Okay, she's gonna get mad at me, she's gonna yell. Is your mama really gonna cut you off and be like, that ain't my child no more because I can't come over here and do pop-ups? Probably not. But in your mind, it feels like that. So pushing that boundary and going to what am I really scared of? What's probably going to happen? And then dealing with that potential reaction. And then depending on the relationship with the person, having that conversation with them and then asking them, how does this boundary affect them? Turning it back on them and asking them what's bothering them about it. Because sometimes you do have situations, like I was listening to a podcast one day, I think it was one that Jasmine sent me, but a podcast about a mom who said that she allowed her son to give to have boundaries, but it was embarrassing for her. When her son said, I don't want to come out the room, I want to stay in, I don't want to be in in everyone's face, it bothered her because it was embarrassing. So also asking the other person, how is me having this boundary affecting you? Now I'm making you do your own work.
Yes. And I so understand that mother's position because, my daughter at the family reunion decided to announce that the family reunion was whack and she was bored. Okay. And I was having a good time at the family reunion, but I knew when they started talking about who are the scientists in the family that they were going to lose the young people. I was enjoying it, but I could see they weren't reading the room. They weren't reading the bus. And then when they took us to the science museum for 3 hours, I was having the time of my life. But they did not read the room. And so my daughter was like, nobody with kids planned this vacation. And I was just like, no, I don't think they did have kids, but I had a good time. But in front of all of the family reunion committee, she decided to tell them that the family reunion was whack. And so I'm embarrassed. Lord, my face is so red. I love the people that plan the reunion. And I know they think that I am, my child don't have any sense. But after I got over my embarrassment, I appreciated that my daughter felt confident within herself to communicate what her thoughts were. Now, we had a conversation about the fact of how you talk to adults and how you communicate respectfully, but I would rather be dealing with someone who has confidence about their thoughts and willing to share it than dealing with someone who's having migraine headaches, stomach aches because they're holding everything in. So yeah, I have to hone in on that. But it also means that I've communicated it is safe to identify what your needs are, identify what your thoughts are. And I'm not going to say I feel like it was a highlight because I truly felt like it was a low light in a minute. But afterwards, I was just like, okay. Stacy. Oh, this is a good one. I had family and friends that didn't accept my lesbian lifestyle. My daughter and I were invited to the family gathering, but not my then girlfriend. I cut family and friends off instead of setting boundaries. Now, this is the scenario that I see frequently, particularly in people in faith communities who feel like this is a violation of some code of conduct. And it is really disheartening that we would allow other people's thoughts about our children to cause us to sever those relationships rather than working on that. There was no question. And so that's what I have to say. If anybody wants to unmute and have space, feel free.
I want to go to something that Charmaine, oh, sorry, Jazz, something that Charmaine mentioned and something that Corin mentioned about fear of losing important people that I think kind of speaks to what Stacy's experience is. And I'm sorry that it even had to get to that extreme, Stacy, in your experience, but the fear of losing important people, I think, is also why it's hard to practice these boundaries. And I love what Charmaine said about sitting with that fear. That is not a concept that I was taught growing up. And I didn't start exploring that until I was diagnosed with generalized anxiety. Is instead of trying to numb the fear or run from the fear or act like the fear isn't there because we're in the Lord and fear doesn't exist, which is a truth. And also, we got to get to that place, right? By going through the fear and not closing our eyes to it. But sitting with the fear allows us to speak truth to the fear. And sometimes our fears are just amplified. Like my mother isn't going to love me and I'm going to be disowned as a daughter. That often is an amplified fear and lie. Sometimes you will actually lose that person that you've deemed important because of their own maybe narcissistic behavior, because of their own inability to respect you as a human and to honor your boundaries. Sometimes it may cost you the relationship, which is something that I've been experiencing in my personal life. But guess what? As Tiffany said, there's a cost you are paying anyway. So if it isn't that person's place in your life, you are paying the cost of your mental health. And maybe it took me having to go to hell and back to realize that I don't care who you are to me. I do not care who you are to me. Nothing will ever cost me my mental peace again. It is a promise that I've made to my own self that if it costs me my peace of mind, it's more than I can afford. It's just more than I can afford. So sitting with that fear means, Corin, yes, losing important people, but that cost of losing who you thought was important, I can almost guarantee that you're paying a higher cost mentally, and it's not sustainable.
Yeah, I think Stacey, again, I echo the fact that you got placed in a precarious position where you had to make a decision of living your true self and being who you are versus aligning yourself with people that were important to you. And that is the decision. That's the fear that we all have when we set those type of boundaries. Am I going to lose people that were important to me for a period of my life, for a season of my life, at the expense of expressing who I am completely and fully and standing in love for myself and where I am? And so that's the difficult decision. That's what this whole program really for me is about, is trying to understand and navigate those waters in a way. I will say that, and Dr. Haynes can talk to this better than I can. When we start avoiding behavior is not a good expression of anything, right? And so when we start avoiding going to family functions, when we start avoiding, like Dr. Mattox was talking earlier, going early or coming in late at the end, just getting your aluminum foil and wrapping your plate up and leaving. When we start avoiding anything, avoiding conversations, avoiding people, avoiding anything, that is a sign that there is some underlying fear, anxiety associated with the person or those events. And so that's what we have to kind of work out. And so I appreciate all of the therapists and counselors out here saying, when you're going through setting that boundaries, try to get into a counseling relationship where you can go through those emotions in a safe space and have somebody work through it instead of you doing it on your own in those situations, because it might not end as well as you want it to, or you might find yourself continuing to avoid or being disconnected from people that are important to you.
Because those are great points, but one of the things that I see happening, and that I certainly did early on, is I would set the boundary and then I would hear all the rebuttal and the pushback, and then I would lighten up on the boundary, and then the resentment would come, and then I set the boundary. And so it was like, oh, you're too sensitive, oh this. And I would, I didn't know what gaslighting was, but that's what was happening, and I didn't understand what was happening. And so what I'm going to say to you, as a person who has actually lost important people to me, that at the time I was devastated, but it was too heavy and too burdensome for me to live alive. And I would go back. The only thing I would change is that I would do it sooner, and I would release them, and I would release myself sooner, so that we could live our abundant lives separately. Because the goal is for you to live your abundant life. And sometimes that will happen with the people that you love. And sometimes the people that you love the most you will not be able to take them on your journey, because they cannot accept you in all of your glory without their disapproval and their judgment. And I say to you, though you may not believe me, that it is for your good.
And I will add, I believe it was Stacy who made the comment. I think cutting someone off, or however you want to phrase that, is the ultimate boundary, right? Like that is the last thing. Like I've tried to implement all of these boundaries. You weren't respectful, you didn't listen, those kinds of things. And at the end, it's the ultimate boundary of, okay, we need to be disconnected. We have to be disconnected. And so just to kind of build on that, like I said earlier, boundaries are how we say we love you and I love you well, right? In order for me to not resent you, in order for me to not have all this buildup in between us, I'm asking you to put these boundaries in place. And so I think for anybody who's listening and might struggle with that, I want you to know, if somebody is having a boundaries conversation with you, they care about you, right? They would not be sitting down having this conversation if they didn't care about you. They're saying, hey, I really love you, so I want this to work, and this is how I need it to work. And I think usually the opposite is received when people have a boundaries conversation, right? You're trying to control me. You're trying to think what I can do. Like, you really don't want me here. You really don't care about me. But it's actually very much the opposite.
Mm-hmm.
It really is. And I will say also, we're talking a lot about mostly functional families. This looks very different if you've grown up with a history of abuse, or in a family where there were no boundaries, or there's codependence and all of these other things. So it's nuanced.
Absolutely. I love the points that all of you made. Dr. Haynes, I saw you.
No, I think what Jasmine's last point was such a good one, that we are talking about relationships that you want to save. And these conversations look very different in relationships where there's abuse and neglect. But also, I think, Rhonda, you brought up when people are having those conversations and they do the rebuttals, where you're just too sensitive, you're too this. And I had to, one of the times when I was thinking about boundaries, I had to remind myself that the boundaries are about me and what I need. And it could very well be that this doesn't bother you. And that is okay. It bothers me. And you are absolutely right. I am sensitive to this. And so that is why I have this. I'm putting up a limit. I'm putting up a boundary here because it bothers me. And sometimes we have to remind ourselves when we're having that conversation, not to make it all about that other person, because we can't control that other person. So it's not about, I'm setting up a boundary so that you don't do this. I don't function well when this happens. And because I don't function well when this happens, I'm going to have to limit how often I'm exposed to when it's happening. Now, and Charmaine brought up a great point. Like, how does this affect you? If I'm saying I don't want you raising your voice at me, how is that going to affect you? And how are that thing? Yes, but the boundary really is about me and what I need to live my abundant life, like you said.
Mm-hmm. And I will have many people say, I want to do family therapy, but my partner doesn't want it. And I say, go to therapy. And if you want it, start the process. And you're starting the process not for the unit, you're starting the process for yourself. And ideally, the person that you're in partnership with values the relationship, whether that partnership is parent-child or husband-wife or whatever it is. Ideally, they value you enough to want to maintain the relationship. But whether they value you enough or not, it's important that you value you, and that you start to unpack, why is this triggering for me? Why is this a sore spot for me? Why is this happening? Why am I engaging in this nonsense when I know intellectually I deserve better? But what is it about me wanting to preserve this relationship that is absolutely 100% hurting me day and night? Why am I doing that? So start the work, whether your partner, your mother, your daughter wants to be involved or not, because you're not doing it strictly for the unit, you're doing it for you as well. Now, family, we have been doing this thing. Ellis, are there any comments or questions that you want to highlight for a brief second? Because we are about to start wrapping up, and I have to tell you, I hate to start wrapping up because this is good. This is good. Now, this is yummy. This is soul food right here, and it is literally soul food. So, family, if you are joining us and you joined late, let me just tell you, honey child, sugar plum, you missed it. And so go ahead and share this. Even if you don't share with everybody on your timeline, share it and go back and watch it, because from beginning to end, this has been finger licking good. Okay. I always like to leave us with resources. Ellis, if you see somebody, you can go ahead and give us their comment, but you all know that I'm going to be asking you for resources that you have, whether they be podcast group, and Charmaine and Jasmine, please make a shameless plug for your podcast, whether it be and Joyce as well, and Tiffany as well. I didn't even say Tiffany and I do sweet tea, or we have Tiffany has a sweet tea and lemonade that I've contributed to, that in my mind is mine. But talk about the podcast, talk about the books, talk about the support groups, those kinds of things, and we'll do that after Ellis weighs in, because he looks like he has something he wants to say.
No, I was just going to add that when you go into couples counseling, the client is the relationship, not you. And so you have to be really cognizant of that. And so if you haven't worked through your own personal issues, I would say go to individual counseling first before you go into couples counseling, because that counselor is not there to go through your individual. And they may ask you, hey, why don't you come in by yourself? And then we can talk about that independently. When you go into couples counseling, the relationship is the client, not you.
Mm-hmm. And many times people go into couples counseling, they already know they're done. They just crossing the T's. That's why I don't even do relationship counseling anymore, because folks will come in here playing. And the only reason they're there is so they can say they went through, but they already got their boo thing in waiting, that they already with. And they just dragging me along for the ride. I don't want to see all that foolishness. I do not. And so I don't do couples counseling. Don't call me. Call Dr. Call Charmaine, call Jasmine, Dr. Hank, call whoever you like, but don't call me, because I don't like the game.
Jasmine said nope.
I don't like.
I don't do couples work, but more power to you. I don't do couples work, but I pray for y'all that do, because it takes.
Yes.
It takes a special person to do couples counseling. That's all I'm going to say about that. But here's a good question. What if it's your mother, whom has always been negative and has nothing good to say when you come around, and you have done everything you can to try to keep the relationship open? Everything is a strong word, but the one thing I would say is this: those negative parents teach children that they're not good enough, right? That's the messaging that they're getting when they're always negative and always criticizing. And so you kind of are growing up with this "I'm not good enough" kind of mentality in your unconscious. And that comes out, and look in your own life and see if there's some things that you didn't try for, some things that you maybe self-sabotage because you don't internally feel like you're good enough. So I would suggest go to individual counseling and work through those personal feelings first. And then while you're in your individual counseling, have a conversation with your counselor about the relationship with your mother and how to properly set those boundaries. But I would say get over it. Whatever you're feeling internally, work through that individually before you start taking on your mother. That's my personal advice.
Absolutely. And the one thing that I will say is, many times we want the people who have wronged us to identify that they wronged us, to apologize for wronging us, and say, and to acknowledge it. And what I'm going to say to you is, you are fully aware that you've been wronged. You are giving too much control to another individual if you need them to say that they were wrong in order for you to move on. I think in therapy, you decide how you want to navigate that relationship, what boundaries you want to put in place to protect your heart. You decide if you want to continue to navigate that relationship. There have been people that I've worked with that, even though I know that some people are going to say, well, that's your mom. It is. But what I'm going to say, well, that's your heart. And there is no reason for you to undergo continual, and I don't know if this is abuse, I do not know the dynamics, but continual, whatever it is that you're feeling that made you put that question in there. And so you work with someone, a licensed mental health professional. And I say that because, Black people, we go to preachers, and all preachers don't have mental health training. And we go to our best friends, we go to our best friend's mama, who they mad at their mama and they not speaking, and so they tell you to cut them off. I'm not going to do that. I'm going to say go to a licensed mental health professional and ask about their work with around parent-child issues, because all of us are not created the same. And so some people will not be able to give you to work with that. So ask for some referrals, but do the work on you, because this is truly, it's your mother is a part of it, but it's not strictly about your mother. Because are you going to continue to let other people treat you the way you've allowed your mother to treat you? So you got to work through that. And this will be our final question. If anybody else wants to weigh in on that, I certainly welcome it.
Well, I just wanted to say, not really to that question. I think Corin had another question in the chat, and it was pretty simple. It was, should you have boundaries with your spouse? And, maybe the married people can also speak up. But the answer is yes, it's a relationship. You should have boundaries in a relationship.
You need to have relationships and boundaries with yourself, with your spouse, with all of that. One of my parenting highlights was one day when I was driving, and I raised my voice to my daughter. My daughter was 3 years old in her car seat, and she raised up and she said, I am not your child. You will talk to me respectfully or not at all. And she was 3. And so I looked at her. I said, I'm your mother. You are my child. And before I forget, where did you get that from? I saw me telling my husband, I am not your child. You will talk respectfully or not at all. And, now at 3, you're not thinking that you need to remove yourself from the room. But at 3 years old, this child knew she was to be talked to respectfully or not at all, and that I was not to raise my voice to her. And so, family, sometimes we stay with our spouses for the kids. And I need you to understand that in my work with children, I've had many tell me they wish that their parents would go on about their business. You are not staying for the children. In fact, you're modeling what should not be done. In fact. So now I think I pivoted a little bit, but I stuck that down in my marriage sanctified soul. Yes, ma'am. Set boundaries with your husbands, all of that. Set boundaries with the cleaning lady, set boundaries with your work boss. Tell them when you're not going to be available for emails, all of that. All right. Oh, this was good. Y'all go on and share this. Share. And you need to share it for you, because you're going to need to come back to this. This is something that you store away in the microwave, put in the freezer, and then you got to go back and heat it up again. Right? Family, tell these people where they can find you, and be sure to tell them about your podcast, because these ladies are dope, and you know why I said that. So I'm going to start with who I can listen. I'm going to start with the person that's laughing, and that's Charmaine. Tell us what we're working with, Charmaine. Where can they find you?
So yes, me and Jasmine have a podcast. It's called Stay Mentally Dope. We are on YouTube. We're on Jasmine heard me out. We're on Spotify, we're on Amazon, we're on all the things. In which we discuss mental health in the Black culture. So we try to find ways to reduce the stigma of mental health by discussing things that are already happening within the Black culture. And we take things such as like movies and TV shows and music, and we break down all of the all of the mental health nuances within these things as well, in order to normalize them.
Yeah, so definitely go check us out. We really love when we did Soul Food, the movie Soul Food. I know y'all remember that when we broke that down. And coming up, we have Eve's Bayou. If y'all remember that movie, we talk about all the family dynamics there. So go see about us.
All right. Sweet Tea and Lemonade, talk to me.
You can find Sweet Tea and Lemonade on Facebook, Now we on a hiatus, honey, because we was tired. But we gonna come back one day. So go on and like us now, as then you'll know when we come back, you'll get the notifications.
Yes, and you can see some of the ones that we've done in the past on grief, on joy in the midst of chaos, on Black love, all of that. That's out there as well. Joyce.
Hi, this has been a wonderful, wonderful, and timely conversation. I am a mental health advocate and I am also on BDO. And every other Tuesday, I have a show called Cultivate Your Mental Wealth. We talked about living an abundant life and our abundant selves. And that's how our mind should be. It starts with our mind. So every other Tuesday, you can find me here on BDO on Facebook Live, or you can also find us on YouTube, Cultivate Your Mental Wealth, where we talk about mental health in the Black community and how to get to a place of mental abundance so that we can live full lives for ourselves and for each other.
Absolutely. Blackdoctor.org, cultivating mental health with Miss Joyce. All right, Ellis, you know where you can find it. Ellis, tell us where they can find you.
I will say this. I'm always here, almost daily on blackdoctor.org, even when I'm not scheduled to be. I'm going to leave that one right there where it is. But I will say, in terms of today's discussion, one thing my mother did say, even though she was a habitual boundary stepper, she would say that stuck with me was, people are in your life for a reason, a season, or a lifetime. It is up for you to determine which one it is.
Absolutely. Family, let me just tell you something. Now, on the back end, I can say this. Honey, child, sugar plums. We had a rough time getting this show off the ground today. And now I understand why. Because it was going to be healing. It was going to be salvation for your soul. It was going to be balm for you. And that is why it was fought so hard. I hope you enjoyed this as much as we enjoyed making it. I wanted to go publicly giving a shout out to all these ladies who took time out of their clinic. Family, that means they took time out of their money to share this with you. So give them some likes. Go find them. Ladies, drop where they can find you on social media in the links when you get it, in the comments when you get a time, so they can go and follow you, because all of these women and Ellis are powerful giants in the industry, and we want you to be connected to them. Until next Thursday from 11 a.m. to 12 p.m., I say step outside of your comfort zone and make an impact and follow these giants. We love you. See you next week. Bye-bye.